of you that don't know me, I'm Brett Shimak, and this is a brief introduction into glacier travel. What we're going to cover in this presentation today is the anatomy of glaciers and the basic equipment that you need. This is a week-long course in most places if you're getting into mountaineering, so this is just, as a 5-minute presentation, just kind of an introduction into what you need to know. Quick disclaimer, glacier travel is inherently very dangerous. Don't attempt it without the proper guidance, training, and equipment. By no means is this a course that will get you ready to actually travel through a glacier, but we're going to cover the basics and give you kind of a little bit of a taste. This is a cool photo. I've got a couple other photos of this place. This is the Khumbu Ice Falls on Mount Everest, and is one of the more traveled glaciers and more dangerous ones. There's an avalanche that killed 16 Sherpas and 12 climbers. That was a serac that fell down on them just this last winter. So that's part of why we're talking about this. So why even travel on a glacier in the first place? Terrain access. Most backcountry terrain is accessed through some glacier. Lots of research happens in these places, geology, environmental research. You have to travel through and around over glaciers to get to where you're trying to go. And most importantly, it takes you to places like this. So this is the summit of Denali here. This is the summit of K2. And this is the, I'm probably not going to pronounce this correctly, but it's the Chu-Oyo Glacier. And this is Everest back here. Well, let's see a couple other peaks. And all of these are accessed by glaciers. Yeah. Okay, so basic glacier anatomy, this is what's on your handout here. And the reason I have it on the handout is so when you're looking at these pictures as they show up, you can kind of identify some of the features that we're looking at here. So the way glaciers work, there's an accumulation area where snow falls and it compacts, presses down the pressure, the time, everything forms it into what ends up being solid ice. And it flows downhill and recedes at the same time. Right now they're receding faster than flowing downhill in most places, so they are getting smaller and smaller. And then right kind of in the middle, you hit what's called the firn line, and that's where you reach your equilibrium point where the snow is accumulating just as fast as it's melting, and that's when you get kind of off of the snowfield and into actual glacier. So the reason we need to know this is because as the glacier moves, it creates crevasses, which is what's dangerous for us and for anybody traveling on it. And here on this slide, you can kind of see some of the different striations that get formed depending on how the glaciers move. And I've got some pictures that show that in a little bit better detail right here. So this is also on your handout. So this is it's the Bernoulli's principle in super duper slow motion. Same concept as like what makes lift on a plane. You've got a flow that's happening, and as this has to travel a further distance than this on the inside of the curve, something has to change. And so what changes up here is these openings, which you can see here, and then it happens the same way around a curve. So this is looking bird's eye view on this one. As the ice travels around the corner, it has to fan out to keep the flow moving. It's kind of basic fluid dynamics. And you end up with weird splits and fractures. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of why we need to know these things, because as these form, super easy to tell on glaciers that don't have any snow accumulation currently on them because they're big and they're open. However, snow falls and you get snow bridges. So this is an exaggerated example of a snow bridge. You can see here, this is a chasm that opens up into the depth of the earth. No idea how deep it is. A lot of crevasses, it's really impossible to tell. So what happens is heavy snow accumulates and it builds these snow bridges. And you end up with this. So this is a crevasse. No idea how big it is. And then as you get up here, there's a snow bridge that's formed that covers over that. And that's what you're really concerned about during glacier travel, is finding those and avoiding them. This would be a whole other presentation, but you can see some avalanche up here coming down on the glacier, which is another thing to consider while you're traveling in those sorts of hazard areas. Okay, so basic equipment that you need when you're traveling on a glacier. Boots and crampons. You need good mountaineering boots and crampons. Bunch of spikes on the bottom of your shoes so that you have good traction on the ice. Rope and harness, you need to know how to operate as part of a rope team. And that I'll cover more in depth in the 10-minute presentation. A helmet, because if you fall into something like this, you're probably going to get knocked around a little bit. A helmet would be really good to have. Keep your brains inside. They don't belong on the outside. A map. A lot of these ice falls are pretty well mapped, some of the more common ones. So like this is the Harding ice field. This has been pretty well explored, and you can kind of see some of the striations here. This is as it's coming down over a slope. So on your handout, this is the one that as it's cresting over, it fans out and opens up on the top. And you can actually see in this picture here the difference between This is still all glaciated up here, but it's covered in snow, and you can't see these cracks. This is pretty easy to get around. This one, not nearly as much. And then, lastly, your two most important tools that you're going to have with you, your route marking and your mines. This is the Kumbu Ice Falls that showed up again from the first slide there. And the reason that, first off, your own intellect and route marking are so important, if you've just spent several hours navigating up this and you have to come back down, you don't want to have to refigure out how to get back down it. If you made it up, chances are you went up a safe way, nobody fell, nobody died. You need to be able to get your way back down, and that's where these come into place. So these are Glacier wands, and they're basically bamboo poles with a little orange flag at the top. And you just stick them in the snow to mark the route that you've been, because it's very, very easy to get lost. It's kind of counterintuitive. You would think on a big open snow field, you could be like, oh look, that's where I came from. But if it snows, if it's windy, anything like that happens, you need to know your way to get back down. And that's just a brief introduction into glacier travel and some of the equipment that you're going to need. This is Harding Ice Field and Exit Glacier down here, and again with your handout you can see you've got the striations coming down this way as it comes, and then again on the sides around the corner. So we'll go more in depth into how to rope up and how to travel safely, but there's your introduction into glacier travel, glacier anatomy, and the equipment that you're going to need.